Public Planning Commission meeting to order, please. Start out with a roll call. Commissioner Mecca.
Here.
Commissioner Fickow. Here. Trustee Brenner's absent. Attorney Schober will be here shortly. Planner Sinsky.
Here.
President Lysick here. Clerk Ford.
Here.
Commissioner Bennett.
Here.
Trustee Howdy Shell.
Present.
Commissioner Zabriskie. Here. And Mike Timmers is here from Kapoor, and Fire Marshal Braun was here.
He's here.
Oh,
There's the
hi.
guys
Hiding back there.
Hi.
We'll move along to item 2 should be on. Item 3, consideration and approval of minutes from the August 26, 2021 meeting.
Make a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I believe the only corrections were brought up by Commissioner Bennett in the spelling of his name
Yeah.
on a few occasions.
I think on
That wasn't hard, man. It's gonna tell her.
item number 8, kind of on the back page, weather updates, number 1, Lake Park storage condos. Third line down, it says the ponds are not being filled with excavated materials. I think that should actually be watered.
Well, yeah, but this is true also.
Well,
That's what was
technically, you are
Word
correct.
for word in the tape. That's what I was like,
That it wasn't
okay.
excavated material, okay.
That's what it said.
Well,
I can change it or add water.
Second paragraph there on number 4, reported that they should just be brought with a T.
Yes.
Yep.
On that number 8, Tony, do you want that to have water added in as well?
Well, that was kind of the point that was being made. I didn't realize it was on tape as being excavated materials. The excavated materials kind of was addressed in the next line about the
Correct.
stockpile and testing. But it was kind of important to say that the detention pond is not currently retaining water.
Right.
I can add it.
Do we have anything else?
Make a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
I'll second that.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes approved. Item 4, old business. A, village staff/official review, discussion, and status update to the planning commission regarding the Cajun Phase 2 fill project. The property is located at approximately and surrounding South 72, West 23085 National Avenue, in the Zone B3 General Business District. Quick update, they were given a cease work order early this month. And we brought in a landscape contract to finish it off. They weren't getting grass to grow quick enough. Landscape contractors brought in fill, seeded, mulched. And Eric said the site's looking very good. He's going out tomorrow morning for another evaluation. He feels the site will be fully compliant by the board meeting. Other than that, that's all I have. You have anything, Mary?
I do not.
Good.
I'm glad you did.
We'll move along to item 5, new business. A, review, discussion, and possible approval of the business, site, and operating plans for applicant/property owner Kyle Conti, doing business as Conti Computer Group LLC, to occupy the east building on this site with the office and computer repair shop functions of his business, and to retain the existing warehouse use in the other 3 existing buildings on this site. The property, which is zoned I-1 Light Industrial, is located at West 224 South 8465 Industrial Avenue. For example, BBV tax parcel number 2068056.
Yep, so Mr. Conti has just recently acquired this property and intends two things. One is a continuation of the existing storage rental in the westernmost three buildings on the site. And in the eastern building, he intends to locate his contractor's shop, and he is a computer contractor. Builds and repairs and performs IT services. So the warehousing use is no longer a permitted use or a conditional use in the I-1 district, rental warehousing. Warehousing as a principal use, for instance, a distribution center, is permitted, but as a legal non-conforming use, it can continue for as long as he'd like to run that operation. So his occupancy in the front building, like I said, does meet the trade and contractors use description in the I-1 district. I've really recommended just a few conditions that you might consider attaching if you're inclined toward site plan approval. The essence of what he's doing is just cleaning up that site. And he's here tonight. I think he'd probably like to address the
Yes.
commission if the chairman would allow. I'm going to go through my conditions first and then turn it over to the commission to decide if they want to have a discussion about it. The application, as we've seen it right now, doesn't propose any new exterior lighting. It doesn't propose any new exterior landscaping. Conditions that I'm suggesting: first, that the site be entirely kept free and clear of any materials, equipment, or supplies stored outdoors on the property and within the public or surrounding view, except to the extent an area may be specifically approved by the planning commission. And if you do approve such a thing, it should be stipulated that some screening plan is going to be required to screen that outdoor storage from the surrounding view. So the plan did suggest that there was going to be some storage potentially outdoors along the lot line. Don't know if that means exclusively the south lot line or the west lot line or both, but that's something we want to make sure that we gather more information about and decide on screening issues for that. Condition number 2, that any planned changes to or any new signage to be placed at the site is subject to review and permit issuance under the village's sign code. Condition number 3, that if there is going to be dumpster storage on this, if there's going to be a dumpster location on this site. Right now, I know it's in the very northeast corner of the site, right by the road, and the objective under the village's code is to have those placed out of view and screened properly. So this condition goes on to say that if it can't be stored behind buildings or in such a place, for instance, between the west building and the berm, where it is not visible to the surrounding view, then he's going to have to come up with a screening plan, and that will be subject to review and approval by staff and construction of that before you can retain a regular dumpster there for the long term. So with those conditions in mind, I don't have any objections to raise for the use. I'll turn it over to the commission.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say thank you for taking the time to review our application. Ron and Ellen, the previous owners of this building, had been there for 38 years. And as a pattern maker would do, many things were stored and kept around the outside of the premises. Many things were stored outside, and it has become a little bit overgrown, a lot of overgrown. It's our intent to remove all of that content from outside the building. We want the lot to be breathing, free of noxious weeds, free of car parts just laying in the field. There's a burn barrel there. There's a very, very large boat that my wife can comment on what we're planning to do with finding a home for that boat. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, so we do have a screened-in area that merges the lot line between our building and the adjacent building. That fence was broken, we've since mended it. So that behind there is where this boat and burn barrel and all these things are. Our two plans, first plan is for the burn barrel. Once we've cleared all the noxious weeds and all of that and literally burned them in said burn barrel, we plan on putting an ad out for people to come and get clean fill, because really all that is ash that was from the pattern making shop. So it's wood ash, it's pine, etc., that's just been burned, and weeds. And now it's just ash, so it's just piles of ash there. And if we can't get that cleared up in that kind of way, we'll pay to have it removed. The boat is huge. It's a huge like cabin cruiser boat, and there's other boat parts back there. I've been working with a couple of the different marinas to find out how to get rid of those, because I don't want to just chop it up and get rid of it, because there's a lot of sustainable like junkyard style parts that somebody might be remodeling or be able to reuse, as well as a dually trailer that the tires are flat on right now, but I've yet to assess if we can air those up and have somebody literally take it out of there. So I've been calling around and trying to find a way to sustainably use up those parts. That may take me a couple of months to do, but it is our intention that it could be after snow melts rather than before snow flies that we get that out of there. But right now it is behind the screened-in area. As for the dumpsters that are in the front, currently because of all the stuff that was needing to be removed first, we couldn't move them to the back. We'll be in a position probably in about the next 30 to 45 days where behind that screened-in area and behind the building, there is an area where we'd be able to have those moved. Currently, we couldn't put them there because no truck the dumpsters couldn't get in there, much less a truck to place them or empty them. But in the next 30 to 45 days, that ability should be there to be able to move those to that area.
It's a difficult situation because we've asked Ron, it's completely unorthodox purchase of a building because traditionally the previous owner hands you the keys, takes their personal effects and is done. Ron had a lot more there than he thought he had. And being a 75-year-old guy, he has only so much time he can get. Well, we got to the point where I had to sit him down and say, I need a timeline. Like, when are you planning to get all of this out? And we've committed to getting it out by December 31st of this year, all of his contents, which will then free up the space to allow us to put both the recycling container and the garbage container in the back, out of sight, out of view, behind the most east building and behind the screened-in area, and roughly 75 feet back. So 100 feet back, actually, so it'll be quite not visible.
I'm proud to say that I cut back enough weeds start as of last night at 9:30 at night to be able to make a car be able to go in, all the way around all buildings, back around, turn around, and come out.
It was so overgrown. There were pallets back there.
Day.
There were pallets that he didn't know he had back there. There was shelving that was stuck to the fence line, the south fence line by grapevines. The shelving was literally stuck. He had to cut all that out. We're getting it piece by piece cleaned up. He had telephone poles laying around. He's got a lawn tractor out there. It is definitely a mess, and it's not how I want it. It's our intent for the next 2 years to have that entire site completely breathing, meaning just grass, just blacktop, the 3 west buildings for storage, because it's embarrassing to take people there to show them their new storage units. That's what's been happening is people have been renting these storage units. I take them to show them the units, and they go, can I go around? I'm like, you really can't, because it's so overgrown from the south fence line that vegetation is literally reaching all the way to the buildings. The GIS view doesn't do. Yep, I was there till 2 o'clock in the morning cutting weeds down. It's just that overgrown. It's just not been kept up. Now, once obviously we get to the point where we get it all lopped off, we're gonna use some chemicals to kill those noxious weeds. I mean, it's what were all the weeds that we were seeing?
It's a lot of like
Thistles,
goldenrod
burrs.
and milkweed and burrs and all kinds
Very
of
nasty.
all kinds of overgrowth. So,
I call it junkyard weeds, basically.
but
It's
it's
the kind of stuff
fun.
that
So it'll be
grows
done
in the
soon,
junkyard.
and it'll be done soon. If anybody makes jelly or grapes, please come. The grapes are ripe. Please come get them out of my lot.
So,
They're overgrown everywhere. You can't miss them.
so we want all that gone. It's the only way that we want that building to be because we're switching it from being somebody who stores everything to a professional office building, basically. And we
Next
built,
summer, we'll probably have the asphalt resealed and lines painted for parking spots for the employees. But we won't be doing that before winter.
it's impressive how much work this really is.
Any questions? Comments? Thoughts? Suggestions?
So to the storage facilities, are you gonna have to rebuild at all, or
No.
is it usable as is?
It's usable as is. There's a few repairs. We've had to replace a few coil springs for the garage doors where they had been broken. A couple of door panels have been dented. We have a garage door repair guy that lives next to me that's been actually fixing those. It's a couple pieces of the metal trim where people have hit it that we're gonna have it repaired this spring.
What about the building that you're going to use for your computer repair?
No repairs are needed, just a fresh coat of paint and a few new light fixtures.
Any light fixtures for, like the warehouse, especially like, well, like the outlot area?
Yeah.
Are you looking to put up any type of lighting?
Not at this time.
Okay.
There's
There are
actually,
3 streetlights that we paid for from Wisconsin Electric that light up the lot.
Okay, all right.
yeah, we paid roughly $95 a month for those 3 lights to light up the entire property.
Okay. Are you gonna still keep your current business location as well? or-
No.
No? Okay.
No, the parking is very difficult there. The traffic is very difficult. A lot of people.
Everybody knows it's hard to park at Crossroads.
And we've outgrown that space. And we've already talked to the landlord, and he's got an active ad out there to find a replacement for us.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
And just for the record, many things have already been removed from the outside already, counting 2 20-foot boats, a trailer, 2 Suburbans, a non-working truck, several shelving units that we would not need outside anyway. So it isn't as if nothing has happened. We're making progress. It's just not going as fast as we'd like, of course.
Make a motion to approve based on recommendations from the village planner.
I'll second that.
Any details with respect to what's going to be permitted in terms of outdoor storage? Since that does show up on the plan.
We don't have any desire at this time to have any outdoor storage offerings at all.
That's the easiest way.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Now let's go change your clothes and clean some more weeds.
Right?
I can see
There's
it.
so many
You would be
grapevines.
surprised.
I was like,
Thank
where are all
you.
these grapevines from?
I see you.
See you later.
Thank you later.
I must have just thought, well, there's no corn, must go with corn.
Item 5B, review, discussion, and possible approval of a proposed detached accessory storage structure that exceeds 800 square feet in area and 18 feet in height. The applicant is the property owner, Chad and Kirsten Callies, in care of Matt York of Millennia Signature Homes as the contractor. The property is located at South 84 West 23478 Sherman Lane. It is zoned R2 residential.
It's attached to 4A in your packet. Sorry, Mary, I didn't catch that one in time.
That's okay. Oh, perfect, yeah. So this is an oversized, overheight detached accessory structure that's proposed to be added to the lot where there's already an existing home with an attached garage at 23478 Sherman Lane. So that's a corner lot. Sherman Lane is a dead end right at that location. Prospective future connection to developable lands to the west. Typically what's allowed in terms of accessory storage buildings is 800 square feet. You can go over that under our code when you have 40,000 square feet or more in your lot, and this applicant does. In that case, you can go up to 2% of the lot area, which, forget exactly what 2% of the lot area is. I believe it was 1060 something. And they're proposing a structure that's 1040 square feet, 1,040 square feet. Okay, so they are compliant on that front. But when you go over and are within that 2%, you still need to have the planning commission review the plans and the placement of the building and so forth. And there is a provision in the code that says if you feel it's appropriate for some reason to mitigate some effect of this building, you can require some landscaping if you're inclined to do that. This particular building is going to have the exact same building materials, colors, roofing, and so forth as the existing home on the site. So it's a tastefully matched architectural design. The fact that it has an 8/12 pitch roof causes it to also be over height. And so what the code says about an over height detached accessory structure is that you have a first threshold that you need to pass, and that is the structure itself has to be set back at least 2 extra feet for every 1 foot of additional height that you're proposing. And then, once you pass that threshold, then the plan has to be reviewed by the commission for the same things as for an oversized building. Is it architecturally consistent with the other buildings on the site? Does it require any sort of landscaping, screening, those kinds of things? So in this particular case, the proposed setback of the building is 50.75 feet. And by my calculations, that building actually needs to be set back 57.5 feet in order to get to the height they're asking for. Okay, so that's the additional setback required. 50 is the code standard. 50.75 is what they're proposing. And I'm telling you that 57.5 is what's required to get to the height they're asking for. Okay, that's an additional 2 feet of setback for every additional 1 foot of height in the structure. And again, the reason for that over height is really to create that steeply pitched roof to match the 10/12, I believe, on the house. So that's something for the commission to consider, but it is written into my conditions that that setback would be increased, okay? And then, what is the other provision? I'm gonna just go through the bullet point recommendations that I've given you to include if you're inclined toward a recommendation or toward an approval tonight. First, that the structure be set back at minimum 57.5 feet. Second, that the applicant secure any and all building permits, electrical, plumbing, etc., anything that's going to be required before construction begins. Number 3, that the applicant enter into and record a deed restriction that will prohibit any business use or commercial use of this accessory building, and that has to happen before the start of construction. Number 4, that landscape plantings be added within the street yard. Now, I left that blank because I don't necessarily see the need for landscaping, given the way this is laid out on the site and its consistency with the other building on the property. But I left that open for the commission to discuss, and if you want to insert something there, you can. Condition 5, that the lighting of the new structure would be limited to low-intensity, decorative type, typical residential wall lights. Number 6, the materials and colors of the accessory building would match that of the principal residence, specifically as depicted in supporting plans and specs that were submitted by the applicant with this application. Number 7, that there would be no new or expanded number 7 that doesn't belong in here. That was a cut and paste from the last time we approved an oversized accessory structure. And it just got caught in my net. Number 8, that the accessory building will not exceed 1,040 square feet in the area or 21.7 feet in height. So with that, I'll turn it over to the commission for discussion.
So Callie's here tonight?
They are not. I am with Millennium Signature Homes. I'm at your. I just actually met with them because Mary and I just talked yesterday about some of the conditions or whatever. And we had a misunderstanding initially on the setbacks. I thought the setbacks were 35 feet initially, and so that was part of the reason for. Aesthetically, we think it would look better to go with a 6/12 or an 8/12 pitch roof, just because their house has got such steep roofs to begin with. And there's nothing else out there. You know, it's at the end of a dead-end street or whatever. They're not opposed to going with a shallower pitch roof to be able to keep it closer to the lot line. In talking with them just recently tonight, they we're realizing by the 50-foot offset, how close that puts them and how much of their backyard that takes up or whatever. So I guess I'm trying to find out where we're at with stuff or whatever. The main reason for the taller pitch was to make it match the house. And he wants to put a car lift in there, and so he needs the 12-foot walls to be able to get the lift that he needs. So that it's the pitch of the roof, just the trusses that are creating the height restriction or whatever primarily. So.
Yeah, so just to clarify what Mr. York is talking about here, so in the R5 zoning district, in the R3 zoning district, I think we are, in all of those residential districts, the village, a couple of years ago already, before the recodification even, had modified its setbacks and offsets to a uniform setback through all the residential districts of 35 feet and a uniform offset of 20 feet on the side and rear lot lines. In this particular case, though, and we have to be very careful with this as we go along, because if somebody just randomly picks up the phone, calls Village Hall and says, hey, what's the setback in my neighborhood, I'm zoned R3, we would like to respond, your setback's 35 feet. However, if you're part of a recorded plat where the required setbacks were stipulated on the plat at 50 feet, we have to hold that. We have to acknowledge and observe that required setback within the subdivision. So 50
Okay.
feet is the number that's required.
Okay.
50.75 is what you had proposed.
Okay.
And what this recommendation says is that to meet that height ordinance, you either go to the Board of Appeals and ask for an exception,
Mm-hmm.
to not have to put that extra seven feet of setback in there, or you push the building back that extra 7 feet.
Okay. And so, is that something that can be determined at the building permit when we're ready to do that? If I go back to them and talk to them about that, I guess I'm not sure what the protocol is for that.
Well, I think what has to happen is this commission has to decide tonight whether you're willing to approve something less than 50.75 feet, and the answer really is you can't, because only the Board of Appeals can grant that exception. Okay? But if you're willing to approve the other elements of the building as to its oversize, for instance, that's fine, and if you guys want to maintain that 50.75 feet that you were proposing, you're going to have to go to the Board of Appeals to get the rest of the answer.
Okay.
The other solution I don't think would be something that they would want to entertain, but that would be to actually have a lower roof, correct?
Yeah.
Correct, that's what I'm saying, is that I just brought that up to them tonight or whatever, is that maybe if that, if we have to be 50.75 feet off the lot line, maybe you do want to go back to the shell or pitch roof or whatever, and
I think that there's, Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, but I saw in here that actually it needed to be just a little bit more than 50.75 because of the
the other garage point or something?
yeah,
Setback
because
of the house.
Yeah, the setback of the house, 1.21 feet in addition to that.
That's right.
It's kind of negligible, but
That's right. Thank you for pointing that out.
yeah, so, yeah, I is it gonna get messy if we try to approve something without really knowing what the
That's why I'm sitting here today,
wants to do?
No, it's not going to get messy. You can't approve the over height.
Right.
Okay, that's not within the planning commission's purview. That
Sure.
requires a Board of Appeals action. What you can approve is the oversize building, and
as long as it stays
you
in
can
that.
approve the setback of it as an 18-foot tall building at 51.75.
But if they
But that's all
decide-
you can approve.
But if they decide to come back and say, well, we'll lower the roof, we'll redesign the building, and we'll move it to the approximately
52
foot
feet or
offset,
whatever,
then
yeah.
we'd have to come back and vote on it again, wouldn't we?
No,
No?
no.
That's what I was hoping so that I can give them, here's option A, here's option B. This falls within, both of these fall within something that you guys can approve. That's what I'm
Yep. If they knock it down to 18 feet and push it back to 51.75, all it takes is your approval tonight
For the oversize.
as to the oversize.
Okay.
Just the.
And you can approve it closer to the street than the house, that little smidgen. That's the planning commission's purview as well.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. Do we have any idea what the plans are for, is Sherman Lane pretty much always going to be the dead end roundabout that it, or cul-de-sac that it is now?
I don't think it will
No, there's a
forever
piece of
be a
property in between of there that's developable yet, that will connect the two with the, into the town, or the village of Vernon,
Okay.
so that it someday could be extended, and it's planned to be extended.
Let me just ask one other question. If they wanted to be closer than the 50 feet, okay, just because this is, you know, that's not the way I presented it, but if they want, that would be going to a different meeting and asking for a variance,
That's a Board of Appeals variance.
okay? And is
And
that
then
something,
you have to prove a hardship to get a variance.
okay, so that's not.
That's gonna be difficult.
Okay, that's what I needed to be able to tell
Yeah.
them. So I guess then my feeling would be is if you're willing to do what Mary said, I can probably get that through to my customer. They may actually reduce the size of the garage now, knowing that there's a big hill in the back that it goes into, and that's where it may end up getting pushed back that way, so they may end up shrinking the garage down, so it may not even be as much of an oversize. That's, as long as we know that we can go up to this size, and we have to be this far away, that's really what I need to know.
But if they're looking at changing the design, then it just kind of defeats what we're approving tonight, right?
Yeah, I would expect to see the design before it goes to the building permit. And if it is substantially different than what you're seeing tonight, I would kick it back to the planning commission.
I mean, they're in a nice subdivision, they're only gonna put up something that matches the existing, their existing house and colors, et cetera, so. I don't. But, I mean, literally, we're talking about changing it from either a 412 or an 812 pitch. And if anything, that it may get smaller. That would be the only things that I could see them doing differently.
Would it make sense to even have a vote on this then tonight if we, I mean, if there's, it seems like they're still up in the air on their design and they're not sure exactly what they wanna do, so would it even make sense to have a vote on this until they have a more solid plan?
We could approve up to 1040 square feet and an 18-foot height
Yeah.
with that 51.96 foot setback to match the house.
But they're not sure where they're gonna set it yet. I mean, that's what I'm getting from him, is that there seems like there's still a lot of open questions that they don't have answered over there, and they're not sure where they're gonna set
It's
it.
gotta be set back that far.
Right, it's gotta be set back that far, but not what's on the map here, what we're being presented. So they're talking about maybe setting it further back a hill, from what I'm getting from you, I'm not sure if that's accurate or not.
That, if they, that would be the only way they're gonna be
So,
able to make some of that
When
happen.
we vote on tonight and they decide to move it, does that matter?
They won't be able to move it much.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
they won't.
it's gonna be where it's at, basically.
You basically, it's, where it's presented would be if it was an 1812 or a 412 pitch, 18 feet or under, that's where it was presented on the map. Or it's going to be moved back 7 feet to go to the,
Small.
And that'd be a second meeting, or a second vote, then meeting, right?
No, that would have to go to Board of Appeals.
Well, if you moved it off to the seven.
No, if it goes over 18 feet.
Yeah.
no, you just,
No.
I just have to be the 57.
Offset.
Right.
I just have
And
to
he
be
doesn't have
Back
to go to
that extra
appeals.
7 feet, then he's done the 2 feet of extra setback.
I've done
to
everything
gain
you-
those extra feet of height,
Right.
which is what the code calls for.
And there's no other encroachment issues on the western or northern boundaries, correct?
That offset is
That's all.
substantial,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'd say it sure looks like it is.
Does anybody have any need for landscaping requirements or anything? I mean, compared to the past there, it's well kept.
basically considering approving this as proposed on the plans, except that the building height can't exceed 18 feet based on this site plan, unless you move it back to the 57.75, the 57.5 foot mark, okay? And if you do push it back, it really has to be essentially straight back from where
Right.
it's shown on these plans.
So the
Otherwise,
off
it's
of the road
something
right
different
away.
that should come back to the
Right.
commission.
Right, and I mean, I wouldn't do anything at this point, knowing where we're at without a surveyor having it staked out anyway. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, because you're gonna have it on the deed anyway, so it has to be.
Would you put both those conditions in for the approval tonight? Say, this is where, on this depicted, that's at 18 feet or less, otherwise, if you wanna go higher, it's gotta be at that 57?
Yep.
Then it would kind of streamline things for them.
Yep.
Yep.
They have an either or choice.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll give it a try here and make a motion on this. Make a motion to approve the construction of an accessory structure exceeding 800 square feet and 18 feet in height, specifically for 1,040 feet, not to exceed square feet for the storage building, and a variance of 21.75 feet in height, given that the setback for the front of the structure will be not less than 57.5 feet offset from Sherman Lane. Did I-
She's nodding yes. She's nodding yes, so I'll second that.
All right.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks. Item 5C, review, discussion, and possible action / recommendation to the village board to amend the developer's agreement as to paving specifications and schedule for paving at the Douglas Court development located at Douglas Court. The village staff initiates this request owing to the condition of required public improvements completed to date by the developer. The property is zoned R2 residential district.
This item is on the agenda at Naomi's request. Essentially, what got constructed out in the field in terms of the actual pavement layer is not consistent with the village's code standards. And there is some concern that in the interest of just getting this project done, it might be best to leave things as is out there and have some revised standard for what they do next spring in terms of paving. But Mike Timmers is here from Kapoor in Naomi's stead today. And I think he can articulate in better detail for the commission what's different and what's being recommended from the staff level. But I'll just finish up by saying that the specifications for this are all contained in a development agreement. And if there is a favorable consensus tonight on the planning commission's part, it is on your agenda for action. So you could recommend a change to the village board in terms of an amendment to the development agreement to capture whatever this revision is going to amount to. So I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thanks. As you can see in Naomi's memo, the developer requested acceptance of the road. The village asked, at some point, the village asked what the depth of asphalt was. Payne and Dolan was a subcontractor for the developer. Payne and Dolan verified that they placed 3.5 inches of asphalt. Kapoor verified through the tickets of the tonnage that they placed for asphalt. We calculated the square yardage of the area, and at a 3.5 inch depth, we verified that it sounds like that is what they put in, 3.5 inches. the count, or the ordinance is 4 inches of asphalt on 10 inches of gravel. So they're a ½ inch less than what is, according to the ordinance, and the plans have 3.5 inches shown on them as well. Nobody from the village was on site when they were paving, so we were on, I guess the village was unaware of what happened that day. So that is why it was asked, and they had to show us what they did. So I guess additionally, the binder and the surface course, so the lower layer and the surface layer were both placed on the same day. The ordinance states that it needs to be a minimum of 12 months apart. So there's that. I guess lastly, the acceptance portion, I guess you can look at the memo, and we did put together a price to, I believe the village asked to put together a price as if you, as in the village, was going to bid out this job and do it as a public project, basically. So the prices here are kind of shadow that cost that you would expect to pay as a public project. Private project would probably be a little cheaper for the developer to do this work, but if you were going to bid it out publicly, there's other administrative costs and whatnot to do that. So I guess really that's it. I don't know if there might be questions. Maybe that's a better way to do it. I don't know if I've covered everything that you might be interested in hearing. Anything that you have, Mary, that I didn't cover?
The only thing I'm wondering is, what is the recommendation of the staff? In the
Okay.
interest of getting this done,
Right.
what would be a suitable solution at this point?
Well, there is, she laid out one option, would be, if you wanted to get to the 4 inches, you could mill out the entire surface, 1.5 inches, so that would be that top surface course. It was placed with 2 inches on the lower layer and 1.5 on the top layer. You don't want to mill less than the 1.5 because you have a thin layer left, and it's just not a good idea engineering wise. That middle layer that's left over could kind of fall apart. So you would want to mill the entire 1.5 inches of surface course and place 2 inches over the top of that, so then you would have 4 total inches per spec. That would also require, there's driveways that are already placed in concrete up to the edge of asphalt, so you would have to do something with those driveways, either cut back on the driveways and replace them, or thin out the asphalt at the driveway, so you only have 1.5 inches through the driveway areas in your pavement and 2 inches everywhere else. So there is a little bit of complication there, but not overly. The last option would be, well, I mean, there are other options that we can lay out. You mill the entire surface 4 inches down, pave 4 inches back in. The other option would be to leave it, obviously leave it in place. So I guess one of the recommendations, if you wanted the 4 inches, if you want 4 inches back in, the recommendation would be 1.5 inches mill and 2 inches to pave back in. I think that's a reasonable way to go. But I guess that's not really my determination, but that would be certainly a way to go.
I have one more question, 2 more questions. Have you ever heard of a circumstance where a developer who comes up short on some part of public improvement bonds for some period of time, or this is probably a Mike question really too, bonds or puts up a letter of credit or something for some extended period of time that allows the village to kind of observe the condition of underage and go back and do the work on their dime if it becomes necessary.
Right, there's certainly that option as well. In fact, something that I have thought might be a good idea. The asphalt's not going to fall apart tomorrow, or next year, or 5 years, due to this problem. Anyway. So yeah, you could consider bonding at a certain dollar amount, however you feel is appropriate, to cover the cost of the road in sometime in the future. Certainly a 4-inch road versus a 3.5-inch road, there is a difference. It's kind of a little bit hard to say exactly how many years one would last versus the other. But certainly, yeah, to answer your question, yes, we have done that. With, like, for instance, curb and gutter that didn't look right, but the city didn't want to tear it all out for a lot of reasons. They determined that the best route was put down some kind of bond and hold that for future use. I don't know how that all works legally and financially. And
It certainly could be attached as a condition. I just think the time period has to be something reasonable.
sure.
And I'm guessing that what would be reasonable would be what's in a typical developer's agreement.
Well, typically we just hold for 12 months, and then we reduce, no, we hold back just 10%, I believe, after the improvements have been accepted. And we hold that for 12 months.
What I understood you to say was that this isn't gonna fall apart, in your opinion, in a year or 2 or 5. Did I understand that?
Not due to being 3.5 inches, correct?
Okay. But still has to be constructed properly in accordance with whatever the agreed upon resolution is. So we still have reason to hold money. We could attach it as a condition.
Or could it be that he pays for the additional inch or inch and a half and puts it in the villages that he didn't do? You know,
we've got
you
several
came up
options.
short, so, but you can't replace a half inch, you might have to replace an inch and a half, and you get the funds for that at this price, 6 years from now, it's gonna be double.
Right.
So if we're not, you're not gonna see failure for a while, but it's probably safe to assume that a 3.5 inch poured all in one day is going to fail more quickly and more readily than if it was poured correctly into the proper depth. I would assume. That's kind of a question, I guess, back to.
Yeah, like I said, the determination of how long 3.5 inches versus 4 inches would actually last is a little difficult to answer.
Well, I mean, if
But
4
yeah.
inches, just simple engineering physics on it, 4 inches poured in basically laid down at least 12 months apart on the 2 lifts. You're going to allow the bottom lift to harden, and then the top lift basically comes in and goes over the top as the finish, if you want to call it that. That's going to last longer than something that was paved in one day and is a 1/2 inch less, just by simple wear and tear.
I would say yes to the 4 inches versus 3.5.
So 15 years down the road, whenever it crumbles apart, the village is going to get stuck with that bill to repave, do it back to the way they need it.
Actually, if you'd get him to pay for the inch and a half and not the milling that take it out, at this point, you at least got something to work with, the bird in the hand.
Yeah, so I guess my other question, you were talking about bonding, what happens if the developer goes bankrupt? Does that bond go away?
No, it doesn't.
No, it does not.
Bond stands alone as a guarantee of performance in accordance with the terms.
Okay. Do we know offhandedly if we have a correct base to this, the 10-inch base?
Personally, no. We were given, the developer's engineer, Cardinal Engineering, sent us upon request, I believe by Naomi, certain information that showed, in their view, so basically elevations before and after they placed gravel.
Okay.
So those elevations showed me that, and I have them in here, that basically there is between 1.2, so about 14.5 inches, to 1.5 is about 18 inches of gravel placed. I don't have anywhere to verify that, but that's what they showed. So they had a surveyor go out before, they had a surveyor go after. So
Do you have any record that the correct base was used to deliver the specifications?
I do not, Eric may. Eric might, but I don't know that offhand. Maybe it is.
When did we discover that the asphalt was not correct? Has it been a while or just recently?
No, it's when it was,
It was fairly recently, I believe.
I do have an email from Payne and Dolan from,
Just in August?
well, this is September 2nd.
I think the request was made in August for verifications and it was returned at the first part of September, but I didn't know if we knew this for a while or if it was just something that was discovered by basically researching here recently.
So if I could, so Naomi sent an email on August 19th. I do know that we talked about it with the developer prior to that and asked about it, and we wanted, actually, I believe it was at the pre-con, if I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Pre-construction of the pond, pre-construction meaning of the pond. We asked for the depths, we asked, I think Eric mentioned possibly coring, so we could prove the depths at that time. You know, it didn't happen, so we kept on, and I'm sure there's more correspondence, but the one I have is August 19th.
So Payne and Dolan doesn't usually just go out and do this. I mean, they have to have guidance. They have to have someone telling them how to lay it, the depth to lay it, and things of that nature. Have we researched, do we know if this was Payne and Dolan at fault for not following the specifications, or was this back to D&M Development giving guidance to P&D?
I guess I can't answer that.
P&D worked for D&M, not
Yeah.
us, so
Okay, so
that question would have to come from the developer.
Right.
You know, the fact that both lists were put on
That's
on a
negligence
Friday,
by P&D if they did it on
when they were
themselves.
scheduled to do on a Monday.
I remember when
No
Eric-
phone call, no nothing, they just showed up, they did it, and then they left it, 25 feet short of John Drive?
Yeah, I remember when Eric brought that,
I
it was
mean,
one
there
of my
was-
first planning meetings.
There was all sorts of red flags on that paved job. You know, the fact that they didn't follow the print going all the way to blend in with John Drive, the fact that they didn't follow village ordinance for 2 lifts. Who made that call, I don't know. It certainly wasn't the village, because we weren't even aware they were up there on Friday, till it was done.
Isn't it the responsibility of the developer to know what the village standards and codes are? I mean, shouldn't that have been all approved when subdivision was initially thought up?
Right, and it's all on the prints.
Someone developed
You
this.
know.
So it sounds to me like it's on the developer.
Anyway, to shake it, if he wants to go after Payne and Dolan, more power to him, but it's back on the developer.
I agree.
So is there more than just the inadequate depth and the fact that they were laid simultaneously? Is there like a shortage of asphalt running up to John Drive, or is
Well,
that
there,
been?
there was, they filled it in.
Okay.
They came back and did that on
It's a joke.
Monday or Tuesday the next week, I think it was, or maybe even a little later than that, but,
Yeah, I remember the frustration with that when it happened. That was, like I said, one of my first planning commission meetings, and it was surprising to me that a paver would do that, especially someone with the stature like Payne and Dolan. They had to have guidance to do it. I don't think they would come up by themselves, but it's really not up to us to decide. It's on the developer. I see the concern with all the people that live there. I'm assuming everybody right here is.
You are correct.
Yes.
I mean, even though that hasn't been a dedicated village road, we have been plowing it and taking care of our taxpayers.
Why isn't it?
It is.
It's part of Guthrie Estates.
It's not a village road dedicated yet because it's not to
Finished.
village standards.
Oh,
It was constructed improperly, and we will not accept improper construction.
Right. And just to
And
get.
this is why we're meeting here, is to give the village board a recommendation as to which one of these options we want to do. Do we want to force the developer to flat out repave it? Do we want to force him to just put a bond up to go towards resurfacing it in 10 or 15 years? You know,
And just for the record, I don't think that there's ever been any discussion on trying to make that into a private road.
no.
I saw that on
No.
all emails.
Yeah, that was in some emails, and that was never even an option on the table.
okay.
Yeah.
think that was just a concern. We
Yeah.
Definitely didn't want that to happen.
It's not on the table.
It's good to hear that you want.
No, that's a village road, or it should be a village road as soon as it's constructed properly.
The problem
Is it okay to speak?
Sure, I'll give you a minute.
I just wanted to say that before we put our drives in, we checked back and forth multiple times to make sure the road was finished. Because we all assumed there was gonna be another layer put on later. We were assured that no, the road is complete. You can run your drives out to the road now.
Which
So-
is not
Who
the
gave you
proper
that
way
insurance
to do that.
Well, just ask.
Who was it that gave you that insurance? Mike Con?
No,
D&M?
we've got the email at home.
Was it from the village?
Well, according
Yeah.
to my builder, he got the okay from the village.
Yeah, it was
To
from
go
the
ahead and
village.
build. Diggers came to dig basement, and he stopped, he said, no, I can't dig because they've already changed the road. You guys had already issued building permits. The road was changed, raised. I ended up spending $25,000 more to raise my home and reconstruct my house. Garage is faced a different way than it was supposed to. The pitch of my yard is different. Now, this to me is a developer who came in and rushed to get things done, to get homes in there.
So the pitch of the actual road of
Well,
Douglas Court was changed?
It was,
Yes.
Yeah,
it was raised 4 feet.
our ditches, my ditch is ridiculous. They had to come out and redo it. But my culvert is this far below my driveway now. It's almost dangerous. But
Because I was at another meeting talking about this one a long time ago, trying to get this board to at least approve all the gravel and dirt that I needed for my yard.
So that was obviously prior to asphalt coming out of
Yes,
the road?
yes,
That was just back whenever it was gravel?
Yeah.
Okay.
oh, but it was, my wife sent an email and Eric got back. Return email confirming that the road was completed.
Who was that?
Eric,
Eric Peterson?
I would assume so, yes.
All right.
That was
So
just,
we were dealing with.
right, that was just completed knowing that we had both lifts on it.
Yeah, it was finalized.
Fix
That's-
that.
yeah,
Right,
Yeah, he was,
Okay to put on
he was
concrete.
confirming that paint was done,
right.
but we didn't know if it was up to standards. The problem is,
Right.
At that time, I don't think there's any reason to doubt it.
well, the problem is that I'm a big precedence guy, and if you let the developer skate and accept it and whatever, and then if you do it for one guy, you gotta do it for everybody. You know, or you have to at least consider it for everybody, it's a slippery slope.
I concur.
That's the problem with the exceptions like that.
If you folks look at this whole addition to Guthrie Estates, nothing was done standard as you would do for a development. There's a process that has to be completed before even a home is even zoned to be sold. And that was not followed with our addition, which then cost some of my neighbors too much money. When you are excited about buying your new lot and building your house and now you're thrown this. So I just don't understand how this could go this far. I'm the only one that built my own house there. I had to follow all the rules from the state of Wisconsin, from all the way down, and work hand in hand with Vince to make sure everything was inspected properly so I could go on with my contractors. Why wasn't this? I don't understand. I think he's absolutely right. I don't understand. Payne and Dolan isn't just gonna, they're a respected contractor. They're just not gonna go and, a general contractor is not gonna do anything that is not per the regulations. They're just not. There has to be something else there.
because then they're gonna get called back out on the carpet, and then they're the one liable. Right. So I just don't understand how this got this far.
What was the time frame that you developed your house?
What did we,
We started the end of 19 and we moved in May of 2020.
so it was beginning, I would say when the commission was, I believe we were waiting for the commission to approve these lots. There was something that had to go before the commission to approve so that we could actually go forward, all the builders. And I was the last one.
Yeah.
They were the first.
Yeah, you were February of 2019.
Okay, so,
Construction started and finished in, took occupancy August 2019.
and I was told by my surveyor that his house is 12 inches off because it shouldn't have been built or approved because the road height was never ever properly done. So then and it snowballed through this whole, it's only 5 houses,
Yeah.
but it snowballed through the whole 5 houses. So I guess I don't understand. I mean, you guys, if anybody's driven by there, or I know I've seen the engineer by there, a lot, when do you put a retention pond in after houses are built? It's not done. Right. It's not done.
Without letting us know that there was even gonna be one
The
there.
retention pond and the road were supposed to be.
Yeah.
Correct.
And none of our
There before
plans
you
shows
go.
a retention pond.
Not a single.
Right.
But all the
shows
plans that
retention.
were approved beforehand did.
No, they weren't. Not
Yeah,
one of us
that's
had
what
my
we-
closing
But we didn't have any of that disclosed to us.
when we bought the lots.
And it should be, 'cause this is a second division, it's not the first division. It's a second division,
Yeah.
so everything should be done,
You guys have any of that original paperwork that does not show a retention pond? or stormwater pond?
Do at home.
What we're given by our real estate agent,
Yeah.
basically, yes, and then
I
what
think
we
this is
got
the one that has it.
to apply for permits, sure.
I do at home. I think, for a fact. This might be the one that.
And I apologize,
This is
I
one
was
I
just
got.
notified of this at 5 o'clock,
Yeah.
that this was even on the docket, so, or else I would have brought plenty of.
No, that's okay, I just.
This is the plan I got when I found out that there was actually gonna be a pond next to us. This was given to me.
And that was fairly recent.
Well, when the first original one was gonna go in on our lot line and have to go into our lot with the berm. But all our paperwork at closing I've got at home, where there isn't a single pond shown on any of them. It would have been hard to sell the buy.
We're getting a little sidetracked.
Yeah, sorry.
So we gotta
Yeah,
get
yeah.
back on the road here, so.
Can I just clarify one thing?
Yes.
You mentioned the flooring versus 3.5 and the paving on the same day. I just want to let you know that it's not unusual to pave 2 layers on the same day. We do it all the time. That would not negatively impact the product.
I respectfully disagree.
I would too, we have a civil engineer, I respectfully disagree with that. The reason you put the one down is so that the truck traffic and everything else will knock it down and basically give it more hardness.
Yeah, hardness.
That is what is done standardly in most of all developments, yes.
Developments, yes.
It's not made.
Well, that's what we are, that's what we are, is a development, not a road,
Okay, I'm not.
not a main road.
I'm not trying to argue with anybody.
Sure.
I want to tell you that I've been doing this for 25 years and we build streets many times, not subdivisions, but a street that has to be opened back up to traffic. 2 layers.
What's the thickness of it? Usually those streets are a lot deeper in thickness.
4 inches, 5 inches.
Right.
Well, because when they did my asses, right off my work is 8 inches.
I wouldn't, so this is a street that you've milled and you're now resurfacing, correct? That's what you're talking about?
No, that too, but, you know, it happens, I mean,
But this is an actual like public street.
yeah.
Okay.
So, like-
And I agree that there is instances where there's gonna be two lifts going on a public street that has to be reopened.
But that's what the exception is. The exception is what you're saying, is that it's in a situation where the road needs to be reopened quickly.
Sure. So in my opinion, the subdivisions aren't put on all the way to the surface grade immediately, generally to avoid blemishes in the surface during house construction and whatnot. I know you
Which
guys
we have a lot of,
witnessed
yeah.
those, so.
I don't know,
I think we should go back to the developer and ask them to either, gotta give them the option. I wouldn't even give them the option, I would just tell them they need to redo it.
What are you gonna,
I'll agree with that.
what are you gonna make them redo? You gonna make them redo the top 2 inches, or you gonna make them pull all of it out and redo the whole thing?
We should discuss that though, because if they only etch it and they put down 2 inches, then when they have to mate it to the end of their driveways, it's gonna be 3.5 inches again, where it pairs out. The middle will be 4, but the ends will be 3.5. And then,
It's gonna be the same thing if you go down to the underlayment, 3.5 versus 4, right?
if he takes it, my understanding of what there is, if he takes it all the way down and they redo it, it would be a consistent 4 inches all the way across. I think the first option was to take 1.5 inches.
Right, I
Yeah.
understand that, but if you take all of the asphalt away,
Yeah,
those driveways are still at 0. Now you're gonna put, instead of 3.5, you're gonna be 4.
You regrade
yeah,
the
you
stone.
have to regrade that.
You regrade all the stone
Right.
to 4 inches.
You just mill 4 inches, which would mill all of it with asphalt.
yeah,
You know,
but you'd have to take it, that's what I'm saying, you'd have to take it all the way down.
That's right, just-
Mike, is part of the reason for the 12-month period to allow the home construction traffic to get out of the neighborhood principally?
That is-
75%, 60% of roads get built, and then we're ready for that second
And to
layer?
also allow for settlement in the base
Okay.
layer and just the soils in general.
Okay.
A good example of you have not to do is what Lake Park has, and that for whatever reason they allowed, instead of an actual base layer of rock, they allowed remilling, recycled asphalt to be put in underneath there.
I believe that's what's in ours.
Oh,
Recycled
really?
asphalt is the base.
Is that correct?
I believe that's, because we were there when they were bringing in and raising the road. It looked like recycled asphalt.
Do we
It
know what
was
the
black, it wasn't
specifications
stone.
I don't, but I do remember Eric doing a proof roll on that road,
Okay.
and it passed.
And I know that Lake Park, they did go ahead and put that in as a variance, and now the road is sinking in numerous different areas, so. But they did allow the recycled asphalt to go in. I don't know if that's per specification for years or not.
Well, that would be in the plans.
Yeah.
But how do we find out what's in there?
But it would have to be a variance to code, because code at that point was, what, 1.5 inch traffic bond?
I don't know those roads.
Well, there's some discussion about that, I believe, inch and a half. They don't really make 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches.
It's inch and a quarter, yeah.
That's where you could core it, like you were talking earlier about taking a core sample of
Right.
that stuff.
You could do that, to verify what's in there, how much thickness of gravel is in there, how much thickness of asphalt, although I think we determined that.
Then I think between Kapoor and Payne and Dolan, you guys came up with the same calculations on volume. That's not,
So the base is correct then?
The
We're
height
guessing?
or the depth?
The depth?
Well, according to the engineers, not ours, the developer's engineers, survey shots before they placed it and after they placed it. It's 14.5 to 18 inches, and it's only has to be 10. Considerably more, you know, obviously verify that it's
Right.
correct, but that's what his calculation in elevation shots.
No, if the road gets milled, then it would be easy enough to go around down through and see what we've got for a base and make sure it's right before we put asphalt back up on top of it. I'm gonna make a motion. Make a motion not to accept Douglas Court as a public road until the road is reconstructed to acceptable standards per developer's agreement, and per codification. With the recommendation of full milling of the road to allow for a 4-inch paved base and 2 lifts to be appropriately done. With examination of the base layer, material and depth to make sure it's appropriate whenever the milling is occurring.
I'll second that.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
So, you're still gonna plow and everything? So it's- I just wanna find out.
Yes.
Do we, I don't know if this is on.
Moving along, item 5D, review, discussion, possible recommendation to the village board of the development agreement and stormwater management agreement for Brook East Subdivision. The applicant / property owner is Stephen Stiza. The site located south off of Canterbury Avenue, just east of Brook West Subdivision, is zoned R2 residential district with conditional use grant for PUD. Development.
So that was a great segue into this conversation. Here we have the development agreement for Brook East, 16 lot single family subdivision that's proposed to go in just off of Canterbury. And we have a template or boilerplate that developers agree with the village does. And understandably, each project takes that template and has to have modifications and adjustments made mutually agreeable to the village and the developer that reflect nuances unique to the project and so forth. But what you have in front of you tonight is essentially a red line of our template. So it shows pretty much everything that is different than our standard document. I'll tell you just for information's sake that we sent this out with a request to the developer that they fill in the blanks basically, and that they do that as a red line edit to the document. But that's not how we received it from them. We received just a black line copy in return. So we had to go through at staff level and distinguish where changes had been made by the developer. So that's been done. But then also, the village engineer, Naomi, the attorney, and myself go through the document and we talk about what staff adjustments should be made to it as well. So I'm gonna propose to just run through this page by page, if that's all right. I'll try and do it kind of quick, so that, but if anybody gets really hung up on a particular item, maybe just put an asterisk in the margin and we'll come back to it. So on page 1, really what are the meaty changes? There aren't any. It's really administrative stuff. So if there's no questions, I'll tell you that what's proposed to be changed was determined to be acceptable by all the village staff that we reviewed. Okay? Page 2, where do we have any substantial changes? The developer at public and private improvements, paragraph 1, the developer had suggested that we would take out the reference to exhibiting the approved plans to the document. It's staff's feeling that the plans and specifications should be exhibited so that there's no uncertainty. They don't necessarily have to be recorded with this document. They can be made a part of the village's permanent file, but the actual plan set should be exhibited. So there's no lack of clarity. Even if it has a date, you know, we've all seen cases where different plans are carrying the same date. So there hasn't been a revision update or something like that. So that's something staff recommends be written the way you see it in paragraph 1. Nothing else material. Oh no, there is a material change at sub 2A, street grading and construction. And this was at Naomi's advice that the village board was asked to modify its road base standard for this particular project to allow the use of 1.25" crushed concrete or traffic bond limestone as road base throughout the project. The village board did approve that, and so that standard is being reflected here for this project, okay? It's my understanding that that change is going to be made to our code in the very near-term future. So that's included here. On page 3, again, at paragraph C2, just asking that the documents be exhibited to the file, and changing, and adding the fact that we want those as CAD documents. That's really it. No other changes that the staff had any concerns with.
I have a question on that page that we're on, down at the bottom of it would be section C, paragraph C. It says these changes okay by the village attorney. It looks like it's putting any costs for the stormwater basins, maintenance, repair work, anything that would be to the owners of the lot, and taking out the developer, heirs, successors, and the signs, future owners of development. Just want to make sure that that's correct.
Yes, I think it is, Tony. I don't know that a lot of lot owners, when they purchase a lot, recognize that these development agreements, they all say successors of the signs. Each one of those lot owners is then responsible for performance of the agreement if the developer is no longer there to do it. So I think the wording is acceptable from my perspective.
Okay.
On page 4, where street lighting comes up, the developer simply wanted to say that the developer would install, furnish and provide street lighting within the road in accordance with the plans. The plans didn't show any street lighting, so the recommendation by staff is that it says that the developer will construct, install, furnish, and provide a street light at the development entrance to the subdivision. Then we go on to say that the village should approve the placement for the street lights. So where do we want these street lights? That I think can be done between Eric and WEPCO when WEPCO is ready to do this. But the broader question is, are we going to ask them to install one street light or two? So the code says you must put one where the interior streets connect to a collector or an arterial, which is Henneberry. So one is required out there, but then the code goes on to say that the planning commission can require additional lights as determined necessary internally to the project. So there's one T intersection internal to the project where the road cuts off to the west and turns down into a cul-de-sac there. If the village feels like there should be a street light there, now now is the time to provide that requirement in this development agreement. So I want to make sure we get a decision on that tonight.
Well, I'd kick that to, I guess DPW is not present tonight, but engineering. Any thought on that?
I did call Eric and talk to him about this, and he said, you know, I think I'm really going to leave that decision to the planning commission. So I would prefer that they made that call.
I think if you look at the layouts, more than half of the houses would benefit from that additional street light.
I think it's a good idea to have.
You've only got 4 houses that wouldn't take advantage of it out of the 16.
So Ripple Brook,
5.
Ripple Brook West is supposed to have lights at the end of each driveway, low voltage, low ambient light. Is that the plan for this as well?
I did see in their covenants and restrictions that there is a yard light that's going to be provided. But as I read through it in greater detail, I didn't really see that it specified where that light has to be put. So, I mean, the presumption, right, is that it's going to be a front yard light?
I know that Ripple Brook West, when we went through the discussion about the light at the end of the street where it intersects into Henneberry, that was something that the residents had said is that was in their agreement. I think it was homeowners agreement, homeowners association agreement, but each driveway was supposed to have a yard light on it. Some people didn't have the lights, some people had them but hadn't erected them, and there was only like a couple of houses in there that actually had. So, and they had complained back that that was actually supposed to be the developer that had put those in. They basically just dropped the light kit off and said, here you go.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if there was anything in the plans in regards to the lights, because if there is, then there may not need to be a actual street light at that intersection. There would be enough ambient light to get by,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know.
It's one of those tricky situations where, you know, the village isn't going to go and enforce the applicant's covenants and restrictions that contain a provision that says they have to pay for the street light, and it has to be this, or for their yard light, it has to be this particular one, and they have to get it from the developer. We aren't going to be the police who go out and say, hey, you got to get that street light in. I suppose we could at the building permit stage. But again, it's kind of us policing a private covenant. I don't know.
Well, I think we attach conditions to the development and in general. I just don't know, I mean, we're talking about two different things, yard lights and a street light, and they do different things as far as I'm concerned. I'm not, can we attach it as a condition? Yes. And what you said, Mary, is also correct, that we shouldn't be the police that enforce their deed restrictions. That should be their association that does that. If that answers the question.
Yeah.
Before it close.
I think what you could do is say here in the street lighting section that one is required at the main intersection with Henneberry, and one will be required at the T intersection within 12 months if the developer hasn't installed a yard light on each of the 16 lots. But, you know, probably some of those lots will sit past 12 months. And so why put a yard light in before anything's built on the lot?
I think the yard light, or the street light should be in beforehand. And that way there can never be any problem like they had with the other, where they're going, I don't want a street light here now, it's gonna shoot in my windows. If they know the street light's gonna be there, then they'll have to live with it.
My other thought here is that you got an intersection of two smaller cul-de-sacs. One's got 7 houses on it, one's got 3 houses on it. There's no other through streets. There's never going to be a through street developed into this. There's not going to be any through traffic. Traffic's going to be at a minimalistic speed. It's all going to be residents and deliveries and so forth. And no people in there trying to drag race, I would hope, but I don't know if it's necessary, honestly.
it comes at a cost to the village, forever.
Comes to a cost to the people that are there if they wanna light or not.
No, but I'm saying if you put a street light in, the village is responsible for
The payment.
payment, and it's not cheap for street lights.
Yeah.
No, putting the streetlight requirements in this development agreement puts the burden of the installation cost onto the
But the
developer.
ongoing cost of the power to the yearly cost is significant.
Yes, it is. I talked to Eric about that. He said it was, I think it was like $30 a month to operate a light in the utility room.
Wow. Good deal, the energies.
I don't think requiring a second street light would be necessary in a
I
subdivision.
don't, I think.
I look at my subdivision, we don't have any other street lights outside of the main thoroughway road that's there, the intersection, that's it, so, I mean,
Lake Park's just got the yard light at the end of each drive, just more ambient.
Yeah, people aren't building out here because they wanna live in the city, you know, with street lights and.
I really don't think you need it.
Okay. Consensus is going to Henneberry.
Nothing else important on that page 4. Moving on to page 5, with respect to street landscaping and street trees, the developer wanted to just simply strike the provision number 2, that the developer shall install street trees in the road in accordance with the plans. The plans don't show any street trees. The way street trees work in the village is that it's part of the village's zoning code. And the zoning code says that along every new street constructed in the village, there will be at least one street tree for every 40 feet of new roadway installed in the right-of-way, so those become the village street trees, and they'll be at a point 10 feet inside of the right-of-way line, okay? So that's a standard that we have. I don't,
Have we ever enforced that? I can't even think of a subdivision that has that.
I don't know.
Lake Park sure didn't.
Any
It got
trees?
put into-
I was gonna say, I don't have any trees in mine.
We had
No
to,
one told me I had to plant trees in my yard.
we had, it was in our covenant, we had to plant 2 trees in our front lawn or someplace on our property within the first 6 months of being there. Certain
I would
size,
say
certain type.
that landscaping ordinance was probably adopted somewhere around 2015-ish, 14, 15, something like that.
Before Lake Park. We didn't have one tree put in by the developer. I mean, we've
Well,
got some.
Lake Park was built
Yeah.
by then.
No.
I thought Lake Park was
First.
paved by the time I even started here in whatever that was, 2010.
I don't think so. I think it was all grown up until about 216, 2-ish. It was 215, I don't know for sure.
Yeah, it was definitely paved when I came on board here.
I guess maybe the.
I can remember wondering why it all sat back there paved so nicely behind the fences
yeah.
with the gates locked and everything.
Okay, that was before my time.
Yeah.
You knew where Big Bend was on a map at that point.
No, there it was, beautiful. I mean, the green grass, beautiful pond out there, all these paved streets with curb and gutter, and it was all surrounded by a big fence with gates locked. Looked,
Well, that's ominous.
yeah. So, are we going to require the street trees, or are we reconsidering whether that should be a part of our ordinance? Are we thinking we want to revisit that?
The developer's asking for us to take it out.
The developer is asking to take it out.
Apparently they're not in Ripple Brook West, I'm sorry, East, West already. But no trees in West, is there?
I was gonna say, if we've got other neighborhoods that don't, we haven't enforced the landscaping ordinance.
You're looking at 15 to 16 trees, or does that have to be on each side of the road?
It's each side of the road.
Jeez.
30 to 32.
It is a
A
high
lot of
standard,
trees.
yeah.
Yeah,
Even if you required one tree per lot
I would expect to take.
in the right of way. And do you want those to be street trees? Should we be talking about, just like yard lights,
But there
letting,
again, is the
letting the
village
developer?
responsible for that if they don't make it then?
Sure.
Yeah, so is the village gonna go around and plant trees after that?
I got a problem
Well,
enforcing.
I think that
Yeah, who maintains them?
guarantee is that the financial guarantee would guarantee the performance of everything under that.
If it's your tree,
Well,
then,
trees
so when
would
it's
be
starting to
included,
crash over
however,
the
it's only
other,
for some time term.
For a year.
is it gonna become a liability?
Yeah.
Who's gotta trim them?
I don't think we need it.
What about the leaves falling in the street? If they're street trees, well, we don't traditionally do leaf cleanup here in the bend, I don't think,
Or in the street.
right?
It's an interesting ordinance.
I
I don't have an issue.
I would say let the homeowners put trees where they want
Yes.
I just
I agree.
actually assumed that went into the covenants of each of the subdivisions.
Yeah.
I didn't know any better.
Okay. So we're gonna talk about taking that ordinance in front of the planning commission at next month's meeting then, so that this doesn't languish out there with no intention to enforce it.
Right.
I think I'm busy that day.
Well, that's just a delete.
I'd say just straight out
them.
because.
Well, we haven't published chapter 16 yet.
Oh, we don't publish it.
You said that's just standard language for an ordinance there, that tree requirement? So that's from other, just like other municipalities have that and use that?
That's
why
other
we adapted
municipalities very routinely have street tree requirements. Yeah. Certain communities want to become Tree City USA, you get a little badge and a plaque, which you put out in front of your city. So it really depends on the tone of the community, you know. Rural communities, communities like Big Bend, where you're dealing with these large lots, it is very questionable whether that makes great sense.
Well, this agreement is going to go to the board with the recommendation of the planning commission. So if the board who made that law that hasn't been enforced, whatever they want to do, you can make a recommendation, but it's ultimately going to be the board. You're off the hook.
The only area that's not on somebody's, that's going to become somebody's personal property is along the south side of River Birch Court. Basically where it's connecting, that's right
Is that where you run down to the
intersection of
pontoon?
Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a fairly steep hill that's in there. Looks like it at least, or a valley, I don't know which, I can't read that.
Would the other thing be too, if it was required for the developer to put the trees in, but there's no specific language in there about what type of tree he has to put in. He could put in not that there's a cheap tree or an expensive tree, but maybe, you get something in there with the whirlybirds or something, and then again, we have to maintain it, or if it,
That's the next language I think coming up was,
Yeah.
if we did want them to put trees in, it's up to, staff to dictate what's acceptable.
yeah.
All willows.
In other communities, there's.
Yeah, there you
They
go.
grow fast.
Cottonwoods.
Cottonwood.
You look for trees that don't have a root system that wrecks your roads and
Correct, yeah.
trees that are salted,
Okay.
that kind of thing.
Just a word relative to the wording of the agreement. It's called street trees in accordance with the plans. And the plans would designate specifically what type of trees and the size and all that kind of stuff. So the plans would have that,
Sure.
if it's required.
Okay, so I think we're moving on with a recommendation that be left out. Okay. On page 6, we're just striking a couple of references in paragraph 1, dedication and acceptance, paragraph 1, where we talk about sidewalk and signs. We're taking those, or excuse me, we're striking sidewalks and traffic signals, since those aren't a part of, and we're gonna strike street trees. Now. Other than that, again, down in paragraph 2B, we're striking the language about traffic signals. Doesn't apply here. Other than that, no big changes on page 6. Page 7, here is where it gets kind of critical, is that we're looking for an escrow, a cash or escrow surety in an amount equal to, and the developer has asked that that number be 10%. Staff concurs at this level. 10% is the number. So this is the amount of money that we retain after all the improvements have been completed and accepted. Now we retain something for 12 months to ensure completion of anything that's not done. Sometimes that's the street trees because of the time of year. It's almost always the paving and other odds and ends that might be on a punch list. So that's fine. When we get down to paragraph 4, and this is about construction issuance of building permits, what we want this to say is that the final layer lip of road surface shall not be installed sooner than 12 months and no later than 14 months after the binder course has been completed. Naomi is, what's stricken here, it says until such time as 75% of the lots within the subdivision have been developed, and no sooner than 24 months after. That is what Naomi tells us the new ordinance is going to read. The new Chapter 9 update is going to be adopted in the foreseeable future. However, what our code currently reads is in the comment box to the right, and that is no sooner than 60%, when no sooner than 60% of the houses are complete, but not less than 1 year or more than 3 years after the base course pavement is installed. This is the current code. The future code, like I said, talks about that 75% number. What the village attorney had said is that we really have to put in here what the code currently says, okay, in the draft agreement. Is that?
I'm going to say yes.
Yeah. Okay. So what we had suggested would be added is that we would put essentially an asterisk statement at that paragraph that says, if the proposed new language, which is the 75% of the lots are built and no sooner than 24 months after completion, if that new language becomes code on or before December 31st of 2021, then the developer will be required to comply with the proposed new language that gets adopted. So what we're saying basically is, if this is truly on the horizon and looks like it's going to be code by December 31st, then the developer is going to be required to meet that standard. If we don't make any changes timely enough, he's going to get the current code language, is what that says.
So the developer is wanting 12 months, no sooner than 12 months and no later than 14 months? Is that how this reads through here?
Yes.
And then our current code says 60%, 60% of the houses are completed, not less than 1 year nor greater than 3 years. And the new code is 75% of the lots been developed and no sooner than 24 months after the binder course has been completed.
Correct.
Okay.
Can I ask Mike, what's the premise behind 24 months versus 12? If we have 75% of the homes complete?
Well, I actually don't know. Normally,
I didn't know if there was
normally we see 75%, like, or no longer than 2 or 3 years.
This says no sooner than 2 years, though, and that's kind of throwing me for a loop. I mean, you're gonna leave that binder course sit for 2 years uncovered and...
It might fall apart, yes, right.
I mean, yeah, I think you're inviting undue wear on it at that point.
So,
and I know this isn't the forum to be talking about the proposed proposed change, that's a public works thing, but I was just, as long as you're here and you're a road expert, I wanted to see what your thoughts were. I think, you know, if you're putting a no sooner down, it should be a no sooner than 12 months.
Yeah.
But, you know, what's the upper time limit?
I'm sure that you guys have discussed that, I don't know.
Right.
But, like I said, normally it's not before 75%, or like I said, 12 months, and not longer than 3 years, regardless of how many houses are up. That's how I see it a lot.
I really
We can
think
check
we
this
should-
back with Naomi.
Yeah, I think
before
we
it
should
goes
stick with
forward.
what we have though on the books right now. Because he's gonna probably sign this before the end of the year. And, you know, if he signs this before the new ordinance is in effect, we can't enforce it on him anyway. Well, it would be sketchy.
Yeah.
So my opinion would be to, you know, just stick with what we have on the books, 60% in between 1 and 3 years.
If that's a consensus, that's how we'll go to the board? Okay. Okay, then under paragraph 5A, building permits shall not be issued until this agreement is signed and approved by the village on a letter of credit for, the developer would like 110%. Our code calls for 120%, and the statutes provide that we can ask for up to 120%.
Do you give any reason why I wanted to drop it? 10%, just. so just-
Cheaper.
Yeah,
It's
cheaper.
cheaper.
Yeah, you're talking $60,000 for 10%.
I get that, I just wondered if there was any specific reason, or if you just kicked it in to see what we would do.
I'm not aware that he's really corresponded. He hasn't corresponded with me at all since we got the development agreement.
Code says 120%, I'd say stay at 120%.
That changes that above one on, what would that be, 3, 2, and E.
No, that's 10%.
That's after the improvements are accepted.
Okay.
That's an amount of money we hold on to after the improvements have been initially accepted. And basically, most of the
Okay,
escrow has
that's
been
our
let
12
go.
month. Gotcha, all right.
So is that our code that says 20% on that, Mary?
Our code says 120%.
No, for the, going back to 3E, or a staff recommendation of 10%, but it was, the 20 was redlined.
Yeah, I think Naomi had redlined in a recommendation that it be 20%, and I think she was thinking about the 120, and so she was latching onto that 20%. We discussed it and concluded based on the statute.
Yeah, but normally it's, I think, 10%, that's what I've always known it to be. Okay, I was just curious, I didn't know why that was redlined out like that.
Actually, that should be 110%, shouldn't it?
Which one?
E.
No,
No, it's-
it's 10%.
It's routine, yeah.
You wouldn't want to keep 110% after they're approved.
Yeah.
That would be.
Agreed.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
You're
I'm
after.
sorry.
It was probably my fault for drawing this back to the front thing while we were still talking about the other ones.
Yep, we're
I
talking
apologize.
post improvements.
Yeah, it's the way my brain works.
Okay. Page 8, nothing substantial. Page 9, this was a legal insertion, and that is to say that the developer cannot assign the agreement to any individual, blah, blah, blah. And it goes on to say here then that if the developer entity, maybe it's an LLC, if more than 50% of the ownership within that LLC changes, then that's being considered an assignment, it can't be done.
That just makes a little sense. The other party of this agreement is gonna be a corporation. And you're dealing with Mr. Steisen, Mr. Steisen has some past history, whatever it might be. If he sells that entity, or sells out controlling interest in the entity, somebody else could be in charge, not the person you dealt with, or the person you know, somebody else. And that could happen, unless you make a transfer of controlling interest in that corporation a requirement that they come in to us to get approval of it, which would be the effect of this thing. So, it's just a good idea.
Paragraph 10, the only meaningful change is really down at subsection 2 under surety guarantee, where again, the developer suggested 110%, let's see, surety for completion, prior to commencing the work. Yeah, so that should read, as we say in the comment on the right, it should read 120% to comport with the village code and the statute.
It's a situation where you're getting a guarantee, and the larger the guarantee is, the safer you are. And there have been problems in the past with, not with this village. I remember I told Mary one in New Berlin, which was like a $235,000 problem that the city swallowed. So, in any event, to be conservative, to be consistent with the code, 120% makes sense. Unless there's some really good reason to deviate from it, and I'm lost to identify what that would be. The one question I had as I sat here listening to the discussion on that Douglas Court, how much money do we have, if anything, to guarantee the completion?
Do you remember him and his ex-wife pledged their personal property?
Oh, okay. And what's that worth?
I don't know,
Okay.
but I was advised that was as good as gold.
Good contractor, the dog.
If it's personal property, that's not the same as real estate, is it?
Well, no, I decided, as Warren's reminding me, yes, there was some pledge there, and it was, I think, all of their assets. Were guaranteeing it, so I think it's everything, real estate and personal property, bank accounts, cars, etc. That was felt to be, I think, sufficient at the time it was done. Whether that would be the same conclusion at this point, I don't know. It just depends on that. Understand that myself.
On page 11, paragraph C, so here we are under surety and guarantee again. And this paragraph talks about how the developer gets reductions, right? So he says, hey, I've built this much of the project. I'd like you to release that much of my letter of credit back to me. And I think we talked about this at the planning commission level once already, just in concept, the idea of allowing the developer to come to staff and request drawdowns on the letter of credit for work that's been completed, provided it's been inspected and we're confident that it's according to code or according to spec. So that language is proposed to be inserted here. It isn't a part of the code yet, but again, it's part of that code that's recommended to be adopted in the foreseeable future. But you can introduce language like this if you feel like you'd like to recommend that it be a part of this agreement and give it up to the board to accept it. So basically what it says is that instead of having to submit to the engineer and then get to the village board for an approval of every single drawdown request, this would say that the developer may request in writing, directed to the village engineer and village clerk, a reduction in the financial guarantee using the initial itemized cost estimate attached in Exhibit E, and you have that in your paperwork here. And it's a very itemized list of all the improvements that are going to be done, all of the public improvements that are going to be done, And each line item carries a cost with it. And that's what we're gonna go on to refer to here. So, they can request that reduction by quantity and line item, the work that's been completed and for which a reduction in the financial guarantee is requested. The village attorney, upon review of the request and confirmation that the work has been completed, may in turn recommend approval of such reduction to the letter of credit. Reductions to the letter of credit may be approved and dispersed with the written approval of the village engineer and village president up to 75% of each line item. Drawing down the last 25% of any individual line item must be recommended by the village engineer and approved by the village board prior to disbursement until the final surety is fully released.
I don't even know that the line items part is the intent. A lot of these are gonna be whole line items at once, which is gonna require going to the village board the way that's written every time. You know, he throws down the base aggregate, well, now we gotta go to the village board, even though we can all see it's down there.
That's true. We hadn't hit on that in our conversation.
The way Naomi and I had discussed it was 75% of the total line, the total surety, excluding the 10% we withhold for a year. That could be dispersed or cleared up by staff. The final 25% of the entire thing would absolutely have to go in front of the board for approval.
That is how Naomi conveyed it to us. And there was, some concern, I think, on all of our parts about, we don't want to let the cow fully get out of the barn on staff's shoulders, right?
Right.
We want to make sure the board.
We've proved that we should not do that by past
Right.
issues.
But this is your agreement, and whatever you feel comfortable with.
Right.
Well, this is your recommendation to the board. And the board's gonna make a final decision. I see two considerations here. Number one, what does the board want to give up the opportunity to look at these things and make their own decision? And for the decision maker at the staff level, that's putting a bunch of responsibility on them. And if there's some problem later on, where does the buck stop?
Right. The other side of it, though, is the board isn't gonna approve a release of any funds that the engineer hasn't okayed that they're done. I think we only probably have one member on the village board that holds an engineering degree that would be able to discern that on his own. So essentially, we're relying on the engineer anyway, whether it's at the board level or at staff level. It's our engineer's responsibility to tell us, yeah, that's according to the plan. What I think the point of the whole thing is to speed up the process for the developer, so he or she doesn't have to wait a month every time up to a month every time he submits a request. I realize he has more expendable income than the village does, any developer, and we can do whatever we want with that. I mean, we can say, no, it's gotta go through the board every time, and that's fine. This was just a suggestion because we ran into it with the Petersons at Lake Park, with the condos. They're running a real tight budget over there. This is their first major development, and he needed some money freed up a little more quickly to start building more. As it turns out, he still hasn't picked up his letter.
I don't have a problem with it.
Right, no, I wasn't implying that. I was just trying to elaborate a little more.
My biggest concern is just oversight. It takes 2 layers of oversight to make sure that we're protecting the village, constituents, and all things considered. Then I know it's heavy to have to try to take it to the board each time, but I almost feel it's necessitated. I look back at what happened with Douglas Court. I'll just use that as an example. I have no idea at this point if all of these different things were done at staff level, or if that was brought to the board and the board approved it, to where things that were supposed to have been done were not completed or things were changed to take out major portions of site improvements. I don't even know if it would have been brought because the developer may have never asked for a reduction of holdings. I don't know. But I feel that if we have 3 layers of opportunity to make sure that we don't have major issues, number 1 being staff level, number 2 being the planning commission, and number 3 being the board, then in some instances all 3 may be involved, in some instances all 2 may be involved, but if we just drop it to 1 layer, then if we don't have people that are sitting at this table right now and our successors, I'll say it like it is, or if they're not willing to play the game correctly, then we don't have the layers of trying to capture that.
You know, that's a good point, Tony. I was thinking about that one. So this works for this plan commission and maybe for this board and for the people that would be directly involved. But what about 3 years from now or 13 years from now? When they have different people sitting here.
That's my concern.
I would agree with that.
I got no problem with that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Because we can't rely solely on the developer to always do their due diligence, and if we have additional oversight, it just protects the village, does it not?
That's correct.
If we need to call a mid-month quick meeting to approve something, if the developer's really on a short leash with having to deal with financial constraints, then so be it. But I like the extra layer of oversight. Starting to play around with some really large sums of money. And it's going to get bigger as we get into the industrial developments and so forth. Instead of looking at 600,000, we're going to be potentially looking at millions.
Agreed.
All right, so we're gonna stay with the boilerplate language that we've had. That is a part of our code right now, and that is you come to the village board with drawdown requests. Okay. Got it. Nothing else on that page of real substance. I am gonna strike the word landscaping at that, I don't know, 6th line from the bottom of paragraph C. No, I'm not, because the terraces do have to be seeded and stabilized. On page 12, and it jumps over to 13, the developer had requested to strike the title policy section, and the staff, mostly on the advice of the attorney, is recommending that not be deleted.
And we have to know that this development agreement is recorded as the first lien against the property. If in theory money were borrowed before this gets developed, I remember you talking before the development agreement was recorded. There was a mortgage, then comes a development agreement. If the developers foreclosed, the development agreement's gone. Poof. So we just want the title. We want to be certain that the title is clear and that our agreement is number 1. That's full priority. I don't know why you asked to tell this way.
I'm just thinking about that, and we had a conversation, and I fully agree with you. But I'm thinking, isn't it really, our development agreement isn't guaranteed by the development, it's guaranteed by the letter of credit.
Right.
And isn't that all the guarantee we need?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I know I had one situation in New Berlin where the developer went bankrupt. And if there is an inadequacy of the letter of credit in any way, there's bigger problems. Some damage happens in a big storm or whatever else. We just want this, and whoever owns that property, if the developer disappears, is stuck with this agreement. So,
Okay.
we want it.
Got it. And then in the last paragraph there, monthly project status reports. Our code currently reads that, or our template currently reads that every month, for as long as the work or construction is ongoing in the development, that the developer would appear before the planning commission. We're suggesting that that be adjusted to say that the developer shall, upon the request of the village or the village engineer, appear in front of the planning commission during the phases of construction. And that's it. There's an additional provision at the bottom of page 14, requested by the developer, approved by the attorney. Let that be inserted. So this will be something you'll consider making a recommendation to the village board.
Everything back here on the stormwater calculations and all this has been thoroughly vetted and gone over.
The plans and specifications for the project itself, the roads, base, all those things.
Stormwater, just make sure you're right.
Not engineers only.
But,
Yes, I got.
I mean, there's, I would have to assume that all the stormwater stuff that's in there has been drawn up by the appropriate subject matter experts.
We have written letters from Naomi
That's what they call you guys.
approving all the details.
Anybody else have questions on the developer's agreement?
So all I plan to do is really just put all the changes made by the commission tonight into the document as blue text, basically, and let it go on to the board. Make it
Right.
and then we'll also include the recommendation given for the amount of, letter of credit,
Everything we discussed, all the changes.
We make a motion to approve the approval of the changes that you have made and discussed in conjunction with the advice of the planner and village attorney.
There weren't any changes on the stormwater management agreement, correct?
No.
No, it's a motion to include both developers agreement and stormwater management agreement, or
The stormwater management agreement actually seldom comes in front of the planning commission. Typically, that stormwater management agreement is administratively approved by the village engineer. And I believe she gets your review on it before it's finalized, but, and that's all been done. But
the stormwater management agreement becomes part of the development agreement.
it is
that's true.
by exhibit.
It's an attachment to the development agreement, so it is included automatically.
It's basically another set of plans and specs that have to be approved.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to approve or to recommend approval by the board of the amended development agreement and the stormwater management agreement. What, a second?
That also be amended to include the letter of credit.
That's part of the development agreement.
Is that by reference part of it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's an
all right,
exhibit.
sorry, I thought it was,
Either
I thought it
You
was
know-
separate.
There was an issue that I thought would come up tonight, and it had something to do with, or did that get resolved? Let me put you on the spot.
Yeah.
No, I have to take it back. I think there was discussion about that road base issue, and it was settled by the village board. So we already ran through that topic, sorry.
I second it.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 6, planners report for August, September 2021. Mary?
I don't really have much to update you on. There wasn't much at last week's agenda that has gone straightforward, so.
Perfect. Thank you. Item 7, fire inspectors report.
August, September, and I'm gonna throw in October. August, fire inspections are continuing to be completed. One inspection was done by Papa Stock in regards to a railing around his new barbecue grill that took a year to put up. So we got it done, it's all safe and nice for everybody who's outside. In September, fire inspections continuing. We have a blood drive, which is tomorrow at the Lions Club from 12 to 6, I do believe. You guys, we need the blood. October, fire prevention month. We will be at Christ Lutheran St. Joe's on October 6th and educating the kids so that they can go home and educate their parents on how to be safe. Fire inspections will continue, and that's basically all I got.
Thank you very much.
Any questions? And yeah, whatever. Anybody complaining about anything? If you're complaining, then just take 2 aspirin, go home, and relax.
You got your eyes on that boat over at the County property now?
No, I know about that boat. I know the history of that boat. It's a very nice boat, believe it or not. Was. Unfortunately, it's too bad it was.
Sitting outside?
Yeah, well, he worked on it quite a bit, but he was supposed to take it down the center point, and he never did. Which is down in Milwaukee,
Item 8, building inspectors report. Anything from?
Jason says no report.
Very good. Item 9, engineers report. Mike, do you have anything?
Not offhand. I think we've discussed all the topics listed here.
Okay.
Lake Park, well, I guess Lake Park storage condo development. I did reach out to Jamin to let him know or remind him that even though it's a private road, that when he's prepared to pave it, prior to paving it, we need to proof roll it so that we're assured that the base is sufficient to trigger the load. So he's on vacation, I think, all week, so I haven't heard from him.
Very good. At least we're on top of it.
Follow up from last meeting, we talked about the pond not holding water. Do we know offhandedly of what the rain that we got here recently, is it holding water or is it still?
Are you talking about that one, the Lake Park one?
Yep.
I do not, I can look into that.
Okay. Because it was designed to basically be a retention to hold water and not allow it to percolate through and then just discharge through overflow. And I believe that it's not holding water even briefly.
Okay.
I'm just wondering because that changes hydraulics and some of the calculations and stuff. They were gonna give it another chance on a rain if it held.
I was going to ask have we had enough rain to get any runoff into it? I mean, it's still mostly open ground there.
Yeah, that's what I was curious to see if it's even had a chance to do its thing.
Right. Not either. I mean, we got that very dry year, so.
Yeah.
Should we go lay some tarps out and kind of fake some hard surface just to see how it works?
I'll tell you
All right, item 10, we're all done. Correspondence? We had the 3 emails that you had in your packet, that's all we had for correspondence, all concerning Douglas Court, which we heard from them all tonight, so. A brief side note, this is Paul's last planning commission meeting. Thank you very much for all your years of service.
I'm gone.
How many years, Paul?
I don't know.
That's unfair.
Were you
For as long as I've been
And you
here.
hear when my brother John began to represent the village?
Yeah.
Well, that's 40 years.
How many?
40,
40?
41.
No, but I haven't been on the planning commission that long.
Oh, okay, all right.
I don't know.
You've been in the fire department that long ago.
No, well,
Yes, you have, because you joined after me. I joined a month or 2 months before you.
yeah.
Yeah, me, Andy Swayze came in with the quarter barrel of beer, and then you came in with the booze.
Wait, let's kill this recording first.
I don't care.
Is it back when they still had horses drawing the?
Yeah, I think matter of fact, yeah, that problem.
Horses, but you rode on the back of the trucks back then.
You rode on the back of the truck, and one time we lost the guy in the back of the truck.
And that's why they don't.
That was Ralph
Paul, would you
Jensen.
take us home for
No, we were on
a
call.
motion to adjourn?
He didn't tie himself
Make
up right.
motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Obviously, no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And we are adjourned.
Uh-oh.
He was on the back of truck 49.
No, I'm the longest, let's
We
go.
were going down. It was
No
just-
idea how long that's been.
It was a trick there. We were going pretty quick, we got out of Sixth Avenue. And Ralph was putting his gear on, getting everything together. He got the whole thing running, but he had to go back.
This is the.
He hit the bump and all.
But stuff like that.
But then we had an alarm system in the back.
Phone
there. We
mosquitoes,
pushed the
though.
button, 49 stopped right there, across the coast. And we went back to get him, he was kind
Yeah, they're
of.
further, yeah, they're further up.
It's good to see you,
We
sir.
were, yeah, we did a lot of.
Thanks.
Sorry for